Und los.
Irgendwas um die 10 Grad, Nieselregen, graue
Something
Wolken.
around 10 degrees,
Dieses Novemberwetter heute
drizzle,
Morgen hier ins
gray
Studio geflogen.
skies. I came through this weather today
Gelernt auf
into the
Englisch,
studio.
dass wir
And in the Ruhr Valley,
im
and I also
Sommer
learned in Cologne, there is a special
am
term
besten, wenn man aus
describing
England
this
reinkommt,
type of weather, damp and chilly, and this is usselig. And when you enter a room, you just say, well,
unwohl sein und
usselig. It
Protest
expresses
gegen
your
schlechtes Wetter
unease and the
vielleicht
protest against
damit
bad weather.
usseliges Wetter zu kommen.
And
Und wenn man dann
well,
in
this
Deutschland
helps
ankommt,
get
das
through this
warme,
weather. And if you
wässrige
then
Wetter,
enter a
ganz
warm and nice
wunderschön
room,
ist
you're
und der nicht
very
zu heiß
happy
ist,
that you can get warm and
sich
dry again. And this
erleichtert werden kann, darüber
warmth needs to be sustainably designed, and this is our topic today.
dabei sind.
That you are here today for the eWorld kickoff and the first event on the topic of Building Energy Act shows that there is a great need for discussion and information. So welcome to the third day of our eWorld kickoff. Welcome. My name is Anne Boers and I am part of the conference team of eWorld, and I'm happy to see you here. The heat transition is also discussed at a European level.
Audience from abroad. So with you being here, it shows that decarbonizing the heat isn't just a national issue. It is something that everyone has to work together to be successful with, and that there's also inspiration maybe that we can take from other countries. So thanks for choosing to being with us. Welcome to the third day of the eWorld kickoff today. My name is Anne. I am heading the eWorld conference team, and I am very glad that you've decided to join us today. Damit Sie heute der Veranstaltung bestmöglich folgen können, haben wir einen Stream auf Deutsch.
To make sure that you can follow the event in the best way possible, we prepared a stream in English and in German, and my colleague is giving you the addresses in the link in the chat so that you can choose the language that is most suitable for you. Decarbonization, and this is shown on the chart that I prepared for you, has already been mentioned in the first 2 days of our kickoff event. You can see the headlines of the first 2 days. Yesterday we discussed where in Germany and Europe we will procure natural gas in the future and how long we will still need natural gas supplies. And on Tuesday, we talked about all the laws and all the legislation and regulation that is affecting the energy industry. One is the heating law, the Heat Act, and this is what we will discuss in detail today. So the question is, will Germany manage to make the heat transition using the Building Act, and will there really be a refitting of the existing building stock? And will municipal heat plan just mean a lot of work for the municipalities and for consultants, or will this really be effective? This is what we are going to analyze today so that you know exactly what is ahead and how you can deal with this. The program starts with a very short input, then we'll have a panel discussion in order to have a deep dive into a concrete example, and at around 12 o'clock we will then complete the third day of the eWorld kickoff. One more comment. You can, of course, ask questions in the chat in the eWorld community at all times. I will watch the chat and I will hand the questions to the speakers and the panelists. And if we still have time, the questions will be taken up in the discussion. And you are now seeing a YouTube stream. This will still be available for you after the event if you need to check on any detail. Okay. This should suffice as an introduction. And today, again, I've got a man in Berlin, and we always had the man in Berlin in the past 2 days as well. And he is one of the managing directors of LBD Digital. I'm very happy that you are here. Welcome, Sascha Schlosser. Yes, good morning, Mrs. Boers. Thank you, and hello to everybody. Welcome. I am looking forward to the next 2 hours. Well, in your previous jobs, you already worked at the interface between the energy sector and the digital industry, and you also visited the eWorld trade fair quite a number of times. And in February, LBD will have a stand on the eWorld. Is there anything that you look forward to specifically? Yes, indeed. It was in 2010 when I went to eWorld first, and then every year it happened, and I could see the wonderful development. And this is also my hope for the upcoming trade show, because a lot is happening. The market is in a great dynamic movement or development, and this will definitely be reflected during the show. Yes, I also look forward to what will happen in the trade show halls, and everybody will be moving around. Probably you will be on your own stand, but then also visit your customers on their stands. Then you will go to the hotel in the evening. Do you have a favorite time for networking? In the afternoon for a cup of coffee, or in the evening for a little party? Well, I really know eWorld very well, and this is a tunnel starting on the first day, going right to the last day at 6 o'clock, and all the times are interesting, and I will really try to use all the time available during the show. Well, I already mentioned that you are one of the 2 managing directors of LBD Digital, but today we are talking about heat planning. So what is the link between heat and digitization? Well, perhaps I should really explain this. I am the managing director of the LBD Beratungsgesellschaft, and we set up a new division, LBD Digital, for a good reason, because we see a very dynamic development in the energy industry, not least because of the heat transition. And I would like to show in my input what the link is, and that without digital support, it will not be possible to really manage the heat transition, also because of the scarcity of resources and all the different tasks we have to fulfill. But I will not say too much. It will be part of my presentation. Yes, okay. We will start soon, but one last question. Do you have a favorite source of heat? Do you prefer a wood fire in the fireplace or a heat pump in your front yard? Well, when we are talking about having a nice and cozy atmosphere that you mentioned in the beginning, then I would not mention the heat pump, although I have to say that on a Sunday evening, really, I like the fireplace with my family. But normally I would decide in favor of the heat pump. Okay, well, thank you for your answer. And let us now start with your presentation, and you can explain to us what this will look like in detail. Yes, I'm happy to do so. And now I will share my screen. And I will get started. Well, I hope you can all see my screen. Yes, excellent. Great. Okay, a short input, a kick-off presentation, preparing for the panel discussion with the guests. later on. And I will try to give you some background information in the beginning. Mrs. Boers already said heat planning is up and coming, and based on the current legislation and regulation, we have a new obligation for the municipalities, and this is to implement municipal heat plans. And this is really in the media everywhere. And in our consulting firm, we focus on strategic topics. We have done so for 30 years. And we also are dealing with heat. This is one of our favorite topics, and we see municipal heat planning not as a one-off task that needs to be implemented on the part of the municipalities, but we see it as a kickoff to a transformation process for the next 30 years. And this will create the basis for us to really plan how we reach climate neutral heat supply. We see risks and opportunities. This is obvious. And I would like to point out that there is a link not only to digitization, but there are also a lot of opportunities for many of the stakeholders. And in the media discussion, we hear a lot of criticism and a lot of negative comments, but now I would like to advertise and say that it's also about opportunities, and you should take a close look at these opportunities. I do not really want to share a lot of information on LVD. Most of you will know us. We have been in the industry for 30 years. We have 50 employees. We have our headquarters in Berlin, and we have a clear strategic focus on the topic of climate neutrality and the measures, the ways, the strategies that our customers have to take in order to reach climate neutrality in the near future. I would like to show you one picture in order to show the entire volume. Here we now use the term heat transition. But what does this mean from a legal point of view? Well, it's really impossible to put it in one idea or in one picture. And this is why I would like to try to show you this picture in order to show what it is about. Now we've got a legislation which obliges the municipalities to come up with a heat plan, and we want to have a climate neutral heat supply by 2040. And as a consulting firm, we have already calculated what this means. And this means an investment volume of more than 500 billion euros. And this is necessary in order to expand the infrastructure, in order to cover all the areas. There are other people even talking about 700 million, so this is still a conservative approach. And these 500 billion euros show great figures. Of course, we have to create the acceptance in the households, in 35 million households. We have not managed this, and we can see this every day in the news. We need around 15 million new heat pumps, 15 million. And for 20 million buildings, we need new heating systems with new technology. And we would also need more than 30,000 kilometers of new district heating networks. And you all know what this means, both for society and also technologically speaking. This is a Herculean task, but nevertheless, it's not impossible. And we have a clear goal. If you have a goal a long time in the future, then you need a plan how to reach it. And now I would like to use the example of Berlin in order to show you what these figures would mean for the city of Berlin. Here you can see a screenshot from a software product that we develop ourselves. InfraWärme is the name of the tool. And there you can plan strategically the heat technologies, and you can also have a potential analysis and scenario analysis. And we did this here for the city of Berlin. And you can see in the margins, the green areas, where we don't know about the heat source. It's normally fossil fuels or also pellets. Then in the center, we've got the district heating network, and then we've got the gas network around this. We digitized this data, and if we now follow the plan, and if we draw the right conclusions, then in the year 2025, we would have made some progress already. You can see the development of the heat network in red. And here in the target date in 2040, we would then have a climate neutral heat supply. The question, of course, is how much does it cost? How do we do this? Whom can we convince? And for Berlin, this means 43,000 buildings would have to be connected to the district heating, and 250,000 heat pumps would be required, with all the consequences for the electricity and the heat network. And this needs to be planned. And the heat plan is the basis for this transformation, which has really great size. Let me first of all tell you what this means. The municipal heat plan says that on the basis of the municipality first, we have to take stock concerning the district heating. We have to find out who uses which heating technology and how much energy is used. In the second step, there is a potential analysis. So what type of additional options exist? Solar energy, geothermal energy, or other technologies. And then we have to create a reasonable scenario, and we have to see the scenario and develop the scenario into an action plan. And we have to involve all the stakeholders. The municipality is responsible, but we also have to take into account the electricity supplier, which plays an important role. We have the building communities, we have the citizens. They also have to know what happens and they have to be informed. But last not least, also the industry and the smaller crafts, which also have to think about new heat supplies.
And last but not least, this means we have a very high complexity, a strong correlation between the individual areas. Thinking of the heating grids, for instance, then this has a direct impact on the power grid. And if I reduce and shrink the gas grid, then this impacts the electrification of heating. How can I compensate for this? There are so many questions cropping up, and to answer them, we need to analyze lots and lots of data sets. And this accounts for this extreme complexity. And with conventional methods, this cannot be managed. And this is why we have created this infrastructure transformation in the heating market. We have to really come to the driver's seat and co-shape matters and show and flag up what's happening here in abstract terms. You have to visualize this, and this is the fact that when we speak about saving, this is always thought in matrices. Tomorrow, we will find more solutions, tangible solutions in business. So we will no longer think and be able to act in terms of zeros, but we will actually, in silos, we will actually have to act across industries for supply. This is the biggest challenge that you have to be aware of from the outset. That you actually think these facts in one common thing. And this actually requires a digitalization and the consistent digitalization, not only of the processes and also a development of the new business opportunities. And this is one of the central success factors. And we see the role of the heat transition service provider. If you want to compensate for gas, then of course you will be faced with smaller business units. Then you have to offer solutions, you have to offer heat pumps. There's a high disruption in the market. There will be players coming in like Orbi or Octopus Energies or Gepard that actually want to do the Stadtwerke, the public utility business. And this needs to be anticipated and leveraged. We're doing this with our software because we're also coming up to our limits with LBD with conventional methods. We have the municipal view because they have to come up with strategies for decarbonization. But also the public utilities for energy, and they probably they also have to anticipate what does it mean for them, for their grids, for the expansion and of the planning of transition. So there are many implications that are involved in this strategy. And this is basically the end of my keynote. This was just meant to set the scene because we are faced with controversies and with a giant task. And before I hand it back to Mrs. Boers, I would like to introduce you to my three panelists. And I very much look forward to Uta Weiss, the program head, buildings and heating nets at Agora. She is the political conscience. Then we've got Andreas Gabriel, team leader of MW Energie as a project developer. And I'm happy to welcome Dr. Holger Krawinkel, who actually wears many hats and who's very busy and has excellent networks, and this is why he can make an important contribution as an expert. And I very much look forward to this panel discussion, and I also look forward to your interactive participation. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Maybe one brief question. If you have any questions, please let us know in our community chat. But brief question from me. You said that there's a huge to-do list, and what I found particularly interesting is that there will be a mixture of classical business fields, and the classical roles will be redistributed. Who has to do what? But at least when you speak about the stereotypes, that you think of the local municipalities and public utilities, they're often considered as bureaucratic and conservative. How do you see, or have you perceived, the preparedness of all of the protagonists to move? This differs, because it always depends on the actual actors and the current status quo. You can imagine that for a strategic consultancy, you meet people who know that they have to break new ground that needs to be strategically pre-thought. What we see in terms of customers is probably not the representative mass, but against the backdrop of the political pressure, external pressure, and the internal pressure exerted by citizens, at this point, bureaucracy is accelerated. And this is, whether this is done passionately, this remains to be seen. But I think it has to be understood that it is high time to start planning now. So they're better than their reputation. This is what you're basically saying, the public utilities and the municipalities. After the brief break, we will look at a practical example. You already teased it ever so well, and you also produced the cliffhanger for this. And so stay tuned, and we will actually continue with a very concrete example of how municipality heat planning can be implemented. See you in a minute.
Herzlich willkommen zurück.
Welcome back to our studio in Essen. In a brief keynote, we just heard what forms part of municipal heat planning and which actors are involved. This was probably a little theoretical, but now we're getting hands-on with representatives of these actors. And I will hand back to you, Mr. Schlosser, right away, and to your guests. Well, thank you, Mrs. Boers. And hello, everyone. As I said before, I'm happy to have you today and to be able to leverage your expertise. And I know from my daily practice that this is ever so important. And I would like to hand you the floor, Mrs. Weiss, because I actually announced you as our political science as part of Agora, the energy transition. How do you view the heat plan and planning, and what is the meaning to you? Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to represent the political side of things and to act as your climate policy conscience. Well, I'm honestly delighted that everybody's talking about heat transition now and that everybody's discussing it now, although these conversations are not always easy because heat supply is of such central importance to the energy transition. And it is completely different from power because we have to get hands-on on site. And this is the challenge, but also a great opportunity. This is the energy transition in our living rooms. It affects all citizens. It affects all municipalities and all utilities. Now on to the political conscience. The challenge is also that the speed that is required is many are not aware. As regards climate change, we're running out of time. In 2029, we will have used up our 1.2 degree budget, so a lot earlier than we thought, only a few years ago. This means we have to be faster, more digital, and better. And this also means that we have to think more flexibly. I would assume that we will get higher CO2 prices, especially when the CO2 emission trade is introduced by the EU for transport. And this also means that sustainable company management has to actually integrate this in their thinking. And this is why I am so delighted that we're talking about the heat transition. This is the right basis. And we know where to go, largely. That's the good news. And there are the geothermal, solar thermy, wastewater, waste heat use. There are many things already available. We just have to get started. Thank you very much for for being so open. We have a first question in our chat that really follows on well from this. As you mentioned, the frame conditions. One listener is asking about the deadlines. Why are the transition periods so long? Why aren't we really speeding up the way you said it? During my last conversations, I heard that other people feel exactly the same way, that people tend to wait, sit and wait. Well, you have to make a distinction here. Well, on the one hand, the requirements. When do all of the heat plans have to be finished across the nation? We're speaking of 11,000 municipalities, and there's limited planning capacity. There's limited capacity of people capable of doing this in municipality. You can't do it all overnight, but this does not mean that the heat transition should be left until it really needs to be ready. Definitely not. In many areas, we know what needs to happen, and this is where we actually should start. The current proposal of the heat planning plan also foresees fast lane heat planning for areas where we know that there won't be district heating available in future. I think this is an important option. Each municipality should use or make use of this and actually create clarity for citizens so that we can really get started fast. It's not only about the deadlines and the transition periods, it's also about the decarbonization of the heating grids. When will the renewable shares be high enough? We're speaking about municipalities and social compatibility and services of general interest and assurance of this. But let's talk with those who have to do it at the end of the day. And I would like to lead over to you, Andreas Gabriel. You at MVV are filling the role of the energy supplier for the city of Mannheim. And at this point, I would like to know what moves you as a public utility to get involved and what challenges and opportunities you see there. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Schlosser, and thanks to the other panelists. The response to the current topics of heat planning and the adoption of the citizens and the participants in the first questions reflect how important this topic really is. Let me briefly talk about the history of MVV and what our background is. We look back on 150 years of transition, and MVV has been a municipal utility. And in the 2000s, we actually participated in the carbon-fired power plant. Then this was followed by the political decisions how to deal with coal-fired power plants. But MVV in the past had always focused and enforced district heat because it actually was a wonderful waste heat product helping citizens for their local heating. Then various initiatives were taken because of the phase out of coal, for instance, and from the generation side, we thought, well, how can we in future get the necessary greening? How can we substitute this big power plant by actually breaking it down into smaller units? We're speaking of 1,000 MBs, megawatts here in terms of heat. And this was considered, and then we took the first steps, and we can see this reflected in the press releases of major German dailies and even in the Tagesschau, the news feed, that first major projects, like for instance the heat pump with 20 megawatts that is operated at the premises of the power plant. But this is, of course, not sufficient to take the overall view. Then in 2021, we started thinking about the grids and the customer side of the business. How do we deal with these? Do we probably have various sites for generation plants, and how can they be integrated in a district heating grid? How can we hydraulically compensate for volumes, and how can we make this efficient, knowing at the same time that the biggest competition from the customer's view are, of course, or is individual heat pumps. So what would be the most favorable solution for the future? And all of this led to the initiation of an internal project, the project Wärmewende, heat transition. And in this project, we actually sorted matters with the internal divisions. MBV is a bundling provider. So we focused on unbundling, and we now need to rebundle these various divisions in order to compensate for the various asset classes. Because for a public utility, it's not at all easy to have 3 asset class, district heat, gas, and power in the ground, so to speak. And all 3 asset classes either have to be shut down or expanded. Where do you have to reinforce grids or large grids, and will all citizens accept these, and will they use these assets in future? And then as a regionally focused or oriented public utility, you have to focus on the services general interest. So everything in Mannheim offered needs to be affordable to actually avoid fault lines forming in society. This is where it all started. And then we thought about actually enforcing the internal development department that directly reports to the management to visualize all of this project. And then we came up with the idea that everything available in terms of data can be aggregated on one visual platform, and to do the strategic considerations across divisions and units. And we quickly found that we should not underestimate the customer. How will customers respond? What will happen in individual streets of neighborhoods? What are the possibilities available there? Will there be rather a heat pump solution preferred? How long will these customers still require gas? Or can we win over these customers for district heating? Because in Mannheim, we currently also are faced with the municipal heat planning from the provider's viewpoint. Because in Baden-Württemberg, because of the state legislation, there is a faster or a more short lane plan or fast lane plan. And this is why we want to initiate an initiative called the Mannheimer Modell, the Mannheim model. And together with the mayor, this was agreed upon. And maybe we can actually talk about this a little later, and Holger Krawicke can probably also comment on this, what we have done as part of this initiative, because this is, of course, a very comprehensive topic addressed by MVV, considering the background and the history of MVV. And actually, since the grids are so relevant, because I think when we are in our discussion later, then we will probably cover the customer perspective more intensely and probably tackle the topic from that side, because we're currently seeing the discussions on the city council level, how the citizens have responded to first publications of the municipal heat planning done by the community. Thank you.
Bitte das Mikrofon einschalten.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. I will then pass on the floor directly to Mr. Krawinkel. Well, you have described the strategic process and the impact it had on the individual divisions. Well, we have the task for the municipalities to draw up a heat plan, but as a public utility, you do a parallel planning process in order to be ready and compare your plan to the plan of the municipalities and to make sure that everything runs in line. But we also have to take into account the consumer side. If we had citizens here in this group, probably people would be quite angry because nobody can really see what does it mean for my own heating system. Do I have to invest? There are so many uncertainties, and in your role as a data protection officer and as a consumer protection expert, what do you think about the role of the consumer? Thank you very much, Mr. Schlosser. I think it is not very easy to really do this because we have the three perspectives Mrs. Weiss already mentioned. First of all, from a national economic point of view, we have to find a solution to the carbon problems. On the other hand, we've got the public utilities view, so they still need to make a profit. And we have the consumer's perspective. And I also was involved in the Mannheim project. There was also the task to do some model calculations to show the consumer which solution is the best for him or her. And this is very important, and this can, of course, be done with digital tools. You can show the different perspectives and views, and for transparency, this is of utmost importance. And Mr. Gabriel, we also saw this in the citizen assemblies. It was very important to show alternatives, although very often people clearly asked for district heating and much more so than for heat pumps. One reason is that the building stock in Mannheim sometimes is so difficult that you do not only have to install a heat pump, but that you also have to insulate your buildings, and this would increase the costs. This could be avoided if you are linked up to the district heating network. And then there is a problem for the public utility and the customer that investments are necessary in the electricity grid and in the district heating grid. And for this reason, it is so important, as you already explained, And this was also a very exciting process at MVV, to leave the silos and to really think across the different divisions and to offer things to the customers. And this comes to the important point. This is getting more and more difficult right now because we have many municipalities in Germany, out of the 11,000 that are affected, that do not have their own municipal utilities, or utilities which do not have any competence in the field of district heating. So then they said, okay, do a great plan and feel very clever, but it's not necessarily possible to implement this. So implementation or execution is so important. And for implementation, I need somebody who is able to do this. And this is also important for the customers. If the customer hears, well, there will be district heating and I have a gas supply and I will have to replace it, but will the district heating be ready in time? Well, this is very important. And we recently went to Denmark and together with colleagues from MEV and looked at what is happening there. They have had heat planning for 30 or 40 years already. And at the end of last year, all customers got a letter from their municipality regarding municipality heat plans. You will be connected to district heating or you will not. So 25% of the customers were told, we don't know yet, but you will get the information in the year 2023. So then it's very clear. Of course, it still needs to be implemented. And of course, the task is smaller than 65%, because 65% of the people are already connected to district heating. But this is what we absolutely need. We have to tell the customers when they can expect alternative heat supply. And we also have to show him that this is in his best interest. Of course, there will be some problems. If somebody bought a new gas heating system quite recently, we have to deal with these cases because it's obvious also from a utility point of view and from the consumer's point of view. If I have a plan, this plan needs to be implemented. And if I expect 60, 70, 80 degrees percent of connection to the district heating, but then it gets smaller and smaller because the consumers say, no, I would rather go for a heat pump, or I do not want to change my heating system anyway, then the entire system will fail. And so from a customer point of view, it is important to consistently and quickly implement these plans. But you have to be realistic here in view of all the difficulties we are facing here, lack of experts, of craftsmen. It would only be possible if you digitize many of the processes, not only the planning process itself, but also everything that follows. We know this from our discussion with the public utilities, demographic developments. 50% of the staff will leave in the next 10 years, so they cannot really do this if the processes are not fully digitized. And then it's important that it's all done from one hand. It's not possible to have one tool for the municipalities, another tool for the public utilities, and the implementation companies then having another tool again. No, we have to make sure that they all use the same digital tools. And at the end of the day, the customer needs trust. If he is told you will be connected to district heating in 2027 or 2028, this has to happen. Well, this really shows how complex this matter is and what it means for the individual stakeholders. Let me have a look at the chat for your questions. Here we have a question from Perl in the Saarland area. I know this quite well, close to the French and Luxembourg border. And here there is a very pragmatic question. If you are a growing municipality and you will soon be above 10,000 inhabitants, what does it mean? Will you get half a year more time or not? Mrs. Weiss, perhaps you can give some information on this. We heard the perspective of the public utilities, of the customers, but what do we tell these small municipalities with the shortage of resources, which then also have to deal with this topic and have to find a solution at the end of the day? It affects 11,000 municipalities in Germany. It's a huge challenge. How can we do this? It is a good question, and it is true, it is a huge challenge. But I'm no lawyer, so I cannot give you any information about what happens if you exceed the number of inhabitants. But there is also the possibility for municipalities to go for fast lane, simplified heat plan, and there's also support and subsidization, and also the municipalities can join forces with their neighboring municipalities. We should not have very small plans and 3 municipalities further. A lot of waste heat is available from industries, and this is not taken into account. No, we also need a holistic view, and to join forces will give a lot of benefits. And at the end of the day, the citizens of the municipalities will then ask, what should I do? What do I have to do? And this means that there is a big change in the role of the municipalities. They now have a new responsibility they never had in the past. And now, as the municipalities are so important on our way to climate neutrality, we need to support them. And we should not just wait for deadlines and then wait until we have the necessary number of inhabitants before you start something. Well, we as consultants also support this view and say you have to start as soon as possible. And we also developed a tool that was mentioned already that will also make it possible for smaller municipalities with fewer resources and a lack of expertise to do a heat plan using standardized processes and algorithms. But I would like to come back to another point, Mr. Krawinkel, regarding district heating, and this is in line with a question that reached us. We talk a lot about district heating, and we now say that grid-based heat supply will play a role, but it's not the only thing, because it cannot happen, for example, in very small municipalities that do not have any district heating grid and or who do not have a public utility. The question to you, Mr. Gabriel, I know that you also talked about district heating in Mannheim, but you also follow other options. Perhaps you can share some information here. Yes, I'm happy to do so. Of course, we saw that on the customer side, we have to be faster regarding district heating. And this means that we have a digital process to connect homes to district heating, make offers to the customers, and sign contracts to give certainty to the customers. We are also working to develop transition periods, these transition solutions for customers where the heating system fails. They need a fast solution, but they cannot be connected to the district heating grid yet, so they have to be supplied by another solution, but they should still know that in a certain year we will finally be connected to district heating and the prices will not be too high in the transition period. And another point, using our MVV 100% subsidiary BG GmbH, we have a full service provider that at the end of the day also deals with sector coupling at the point of the customers. Those people who will not get connected to the district heating are offered other solutions, heat pump, photovoltaics, e-mobility, all in one-stop shop, coupled with the necessary rates and tariffs. And we structured this in such a way that we can offer a package to the customers so that they have some certainty. And we also work with our own craftsmen and installers, which guarantee the necessary quality of installations. So also taking into account the regulations that some work needs to be done on the scaffolding, and we as MVV always want to make sure that everybody who works on our construction sites is properly protected and complying with all the occupational safety and health regulations. And we are also speeding up the installation of heat pumps. Now we manage to install the heat pumps in between 3 or 4 days. We have some partner companies, and we are discussing a further acceleration to make sure that the people really have the impression that progress is made. This is very important in all this topic, in all the discussions around the heat transition. We also have to look back into the past. Why do we have these gas heaters now? 50, 80 years of research went into productivity increases, and now we see more and more gas heaters, and a lot was invested, and now we have to invest the same work and the same amount of money into heat pumps. One of our partners, a major manufacturer having a manufacturing site in Böblingen, will produce more than 1 million of heat pumps soon for Europe, in Europe. And all this will, of course, also accelerate the heat transition. But now I can see that more and more questions are coming here into the chat. There is another question which might fit in here. This is about public utilities, but also about the smaller municipalities. Here, I also would like to make one more comment on our behalf, on behalf of the MVV. We have MVV Regioplan, a subsidiary, which also is involved in heat plans, offers heat planning, always with partners. But I think if I take a look at the huge opportunities that occur here, that we really have to focus on the benefits and not the risks. The smaller municipalities should not be isolated, but should join forces in a larger district. We see this in the greater area Mannheim-Neckar. They should think in and join forces with other municipalities. We also supply district heating to Heidelberg, to other areas. And this is quite relevant, and Holger Krawinkel may be able to also share some information on Denmark, because there was also a question on Denmark in the chat. Perhaps you can explain how this is done in Denmark. Thank you very much.
Well, you gave us the buzzword of small municipalities, district heating, yes or no. Let me be a little more provocative. When we look at what's currently happening on the market, We do a competition survey for the ministry every quarter of the year and actually follow the market developments in new business models that are really disruptive for the current business model of public utilities. We see the L parts, for instance, then Obi will soon come in with a complete package, storage, heat pump, etc., and successfully so. They are disrupting the market. When you look at the growth figures of Rapta, isn't this a public utility business? Aren't they just losing market shares right now? We are aware, of course, of the obstacles that still exist in public utilities. But when we look at the strategic level, and if we really want to cope with the compensation tasks ahead of us, and let me ask all of you, shouldn't we speed up more and be more consistent? Yes, this is exactly the point. Skilled labor, this needs to be rethought, this topic. When we speak of sanitary heating and air conditioning, then it should be made possible that some workers only look after the heating and can be insured and are authorized to install heat pumps without being afraid that they will actually interfere with any other skilled trades, or if there's a rupture, a broken pipe, and you first have to find out about the problem and that you're then later held liable. I think we have to rethink this. So we also have to couple sectors on the skilled crafts level. This is highly relevant. And as I already alluded to it, we have also established such a unit, bringing together various sites in Frankfurt in the Black Forest all the way down to Karlsruhe, in our investments in Offenbach, in Kehl, where we offer these services with our own people, and where we can tell our customers, you will find us. We've been around for 150 years. You can call us and we'll do the job for you. We're learning a lot. We've learned a lot over the past few years. We've also learned how to accelerate matters. We have also learned that logistics centers can accelerate the process by putting together packages. With a heat pump, for instance, you, of course, need to load trucks differently. With a gas boiler, this was not the problem. With a heat pump, you can store them accordingly. A product that weighs 150 or 200 kilograms, then I cannot handle it with one person. I need a second person, and I also need handlers, telehandlers, for instance, to bring down the heat pump to the basement. Then the manufacturers offering storage systems that only weigh 80 kilograms rather than 250 kilograms. This also speeds up the process of installation in basements. There are many approaches available. And this is probably also important to mention. There will be a growing market over the next few years, and the market is so relevant and so big, as you rightly said, Mr. Schlosser, that there is enough room for everyone. I think that this is an important statement, and things are getting more affordable. Exactly. I share this view, and we just have to be aware of it. And to bring the ball back into your field, Mr. Krawinkel, when I consider the possibilities provided by district heating, we know that heat pumps will be essential. My thesis is that every operator of a power grid should actually promote and welcome this development, because wherever there used to be Total tank trucks, there will be money flowing through the power lines in future. I'm still missing this euphoria. Or do I see this differently or wrongly, maybe? How do you feel about it? Yes, please. Yeah, Mrs. Weiss, why don't you get started? Yes, this is a wonderful question. Where's the euphoria? Well, I hear that power grid operators are pretty busy too. They're still faced with a huge expansion challenge. They're not bored right now. And we are trying to bring more transparency about the state of the art in the grid and where digitalization can help, and where certain investment is only available later. This is a central question you posed, and it is also a question that municipalities should not lose sight of, because there's no good making a heat plan for municipalities, and there are decentralized neighborhoods where they will have lots of heat pumps, and the grid can take it. So in the heat planning, we should already closely cooperate with the distribution company. And heat plans should include this. Heat plan is not just a planning of the heat network or the heat grid, but also the power grids and the gas grids. Well, Mrs. Weiss, I would have said exactly the same thing. Yeah, I thought you would add something different. Yeah. Well, the question, and I will answer it in a minute. I saw it in the chat. There are so many heating or heat cooperatives. This is one outstanding model, and that they're working as non-profit companies. This is up to the municipalities themselves, how big the turnover is or the margin is that municipalities can generate with such a model. This is the challenge that we see and that we heard from the other colleagues as well. This heat planning is, of course, a call to act. If I actually just look at it saying, well, passively, that's very bad. But if I say, well, I tackle it now, I have to do it, or finally I can do something for my citizens, and I can even develop new business fields for my power plant, then it's a completely different story. What I found very impressive when I visited Denmark was the following. We looked at a rare area between Jutland and Funen, many municipalities that are linked and that have their own cooperative. And there was one little municipality which was not foreseen for district heating originally because it didn't look efficient after the first calculations. Then they said, well, but we'll do it by ourselves. And all of a sudden, the bigger group said, well, before you actually get started yourself, we will actually include you. This is a very easy way to also motivate public utilities to do the job and get started. And InfraVol is discussing this. It is important to enter this heating business as a business across all of the various trades. There are some companies that are already offering this service. For local district heating, I have to get a heat source, an energy source first. Great, a combination of solar energy and wind power. So I actually install solar panels, I install heat pumps, and I also have a windmill. Of course, there the costs for actually placing the lines are lower, and this is why I would never exclude this solution. Even there, it could pay off to have district heating. The question was also asked, what do the small municipalities do? We do not know how this will play out in the end. But the idea we discussed with some energy agency, I found this very good. And this is to actually do feasibility studies. If they say we want a local district heating network, then initiate feasibility study and to also reduce red tape because they have this clear objective in mind. What really has proved a problem is the following. There is this municipality reform in Denmark. There are no districts left. There are only 6 lenders, so to speak. This would be 1,200 municipalities, but we have 10 times as many in Germany. This is the second point. And with the 900 public utilities and grid operators, this will complicate matters even further. And I think you should never lose sight of the fundamental reforms when you look at the challenges. Let me add, especially through the demographic change, we have to really focus our resources and forces. And we can no longer afford to do the same things redundantly. We have to cooperate more closely. And especially for heat planning, there are many models to join forces, also taking a regional approach, especially with the exploitation of geothermal energy. I cannot say this is municipality A, B, C, and now there's municipality C saying, no, we want to have it all to ourselves. This is, of course, not acceptable. This is where this cross-municipality planning is so important to make sure that the results are acceptable for all citizens across the whole region. Well, Mr. Krawinkel, what you said is, of course, correct. Questioning the system as a whole. This can also be transferred to unbundling, for instance, but it is my aim, our aim, and you know this from our joint discussions, that at the point where now heat planning must be understood as a task to be tackled, as a call to action. I think it is simply important to also refer to examples, not only from Denmark, but also in Germany. In Bavaria, for instance, there is a little municipality that made the headlines. And this municipality, independent of policymakers and independent of resources, this municipality said, well, there is a time plan that actually provides us with supply for 15 years with gas and oil, and what happens afterwards. And they looked for a developer and found a developer who did exactly this. They actually installed a heating a power plant, and they actually installed a small local district heating grid. And all house users or owners were made partners in a cooperative. So the grid is owned by each and every one who joined and signed the contract. And in this way, it was ensured that for the next 30 years, the power supply will actually be ensured through solar radiation and through the writing down of the costs. So they were also able to ensure an affordable price, a price for energy that is lower than the average market price. And they did the feasibility study according to the Building Energy Act. And I think we have examples in this country, and there is more and more cases where small municipalities, because of the fact that they are left alone, because they are not receiving any resources, they're not funded, nor are they involved in bigger grids. I think you can also fall back on solutions today that actually offer added value for each and everyone involved. But to this end, you have to take the first step. And there's software solutions, for instance, but at the end of the day, there are other solutions that can do it. At the end of the day, you can use your existing infrastructure analyze it, and at the push of a button, you can develop scenarios for the future that allow you to file a proposal for such a project. And I think that this is really a decisive point. It's a question of mindset. We have this mindset to focus on the difficulties or the complexity, but not on the possibilities. But this project will only work like eating an elephant, piece by piece. You have to start with small pieces. You've done this wonderfully in Mannheim. And you're really making big progress in Mannheim. The last 25 heat plants have now been published. This is the current figure. And you can also see the measures resulting from this. And I can warmly recommend to read the data. This is all published, all of the results, and you can look the way they're headed.
Mrs. Weiss, do you also have something to say here? Do you also monitor or watch what is happening there? Well, we do not take a look at the smaller heat plants, but we observe the general environment. And from a political point of view, we see that we've got the problem of the chicken and the egg. Well, there is no clear political regulation because we do not have too many examples, and we do not have any practical examples because everybody is waiting for political regulations. And this is, of course, impossible. From my point of view, we need some entrepreneurial spirit here. And what we also see in surveys over and over again, if you think about the customer perspective, well, most people are much farther advanced and much more motivated for climate protection than is assumed. Climate protection is always high on the agenda of people, and many people are saying, well, I would do more, but my neighbor is not willing to do anything. So you always underestimate the willingness to get active among others. And this is why it's so important to just get started. And we, of course, are very happy about all the projects that make progress. And I want to come back to the topic of acceleration. This is very important on a political level. We say we need more companies implementing things, offering services, and they need trained staff. We are talking about digitization, specialization. Of course, it can only happen fast if a company offering heating solutions is specialized on heating solutions. But in accordance with the current legislation, the companies cannot train people if they do not have other areas in their company. According to the current standard, it takes 7 to 8 years before we've got a new regulation on training. That's not possible. Then it's 2030, and then we have a training regulation and still no trained staff. This is not possible. Here, the federal level really has to get active and accelerate things. And another point on this. Years ago, I was also involved in the roadmap energy efficiency of the Federal Ministry of the Economy. And then they said, okay, well, the training regulations, they can't be changed because it takes so long. Now it's so many years later and no progress whatsoever was made. And we do not have simple and fast training. Yes, well, let me come in here if this is all right with everybody, because this is also a topic that is very important for us as MVV and for me personally. Well, the smaller craftsmen, they do a lot, but why don't we see economies of scale? Today we use cranes, excavators. The craftsmen have apps where they can just enter information. You no longer have to work on the basis of pen and paper, and all these efficiency gains that we have based on digital tools are not handed on. And yesterday I talked with the chairman of the Federal Association for Buildings Modernization, and they said that it's possible to have an efficiency refurbishment of a building within 22 days in a normal building, terraced house, so they could refurbish the insulation in 22 days. But then he said the craftsman for the bills that they write, he knows exactly that a building has 150 square meters of a facade, and then in the bill it said 184. So it's about money at the end of the day, and this makes people fear this whole thing, because the building prices, the construction prices are very high. And in Austria, there is a study that the building costs are still at the same level, but the prices went up. And we have to see what can be done in this area. And so the approaches that I hear from the Hagebau DIY market that you mentioned, that there is a package of products bundled for the customers, is the right thing to do. You really have to create efficiencies and pass it on to the customers. Only then will it be interesting for customers to change the insulation in their buildings and to follow the way towards decarbonization. If I see that a terraced house can be fully equipped within 22 days, then it's a good news. But we have to have this productivity and all the construction times, the digitization in the construction area needs to be used, needs to be accelerated, and this needs to be done at the top political level. It's not sufficient to just do what we always did. In 7 years, we will have a new training regulation and we can start training people, and perhaps it is sufficient if you just have 2 more weeks of training on heat pumps in the existing regulation. This is not possible. In this way, we will lose speed. I would like to mention something on the 22 days. We are supporting this project at Agora. And yes, of course, we have to make efficiencies, but I also want to praise the craftsmen involved. They did an excellent job in this project. This was really high performance sports for them. And for them, it was really new, for most of them, because it was a pilot project. And it really was a fantastic result. Absolutely, says Mr. Gabriel. And we are now also waiting for figures on productivity, and some efficiencies were removed. So there are some lists how much time you spent on a construction site searching for material, and this was eliminated. And this also shows another good point about the heat transition. If you talk to the homeowner, this is an attractive product, and this is something that is lacking in the heat transition. Heat transition is the energy transition in the living room. You can sell a lot of products that people like, but a new insulation for the house or a new heating is not a product people like. But then the homeowners after this project said, yes, it was a very exciting time, but they knew that everything was in time and everything was running smoothly. And they didn't have to wait too long. And especially some families in the past had to wait 1 year before they got something installed. And this is too bad. So things must be faster. They must be cheaper, and they must be more attractive. Yes, I'm hearing you. And I heard this from many stakeholders. But now if I hear our minister, Mr. Habeck, and said, we have to do this. Well, nobody ever said that it's easy to reach climate neutrality, and it won't happen if we are still sitting on the couch. The whole society must get involved, and you can think it's good or bad, but why don't we just go there and also consistently tell the message and tell the people that it is an effort? And nevertheless, things need to be done. And again, we are talking about the problems and the craftsmen and the training periods. I do not want to act as a teacher here, but what are the success factors? What are the benefits? What do I tell our audience here at the end? So what do they learn here, except for everything is difficult? So where are the success factors? Mr. Krawinkel, please. Well, it's relatively simple from my point of view. This is just the will to really get active and do something. If I don't want to do things, then I always find the impediments and the obstacles and I say this is not possible because this or that. No, we need the will to get active, and this requires a certain change in the mentality, in the mindset, in the energy and heat sector. So this attitude, well, the gas comes from the pipeline and the electricity comes from our socket, is no longer possible. So the utilities made a profit on this. It all worked for a very long time, but we can't continue in this way. And this change of mindset, of course, also requires new people who are willing to promote things. I think this is a double strategy we have to follow. We need good examples, yes, and these good examples have to be shared and promoted. But on the other hand, I need strict monitoring. I always have to watch what is good, what needs to change. For example, the points that were mentioned by Mrs. Weiss. And then this needs to be implemented very soon. So if the implementation process takes 2 years until some regulation is changed, this is no longer possible. And the next point, these structural changes also have to focus on what will happen long term. So the regulations for the craftsmen, they're still dating back to the Middle Ages, and this is not suitable for modern society, but people try to defend this, but we just have to say, no, it's not possible. We should not have this strict separation between different crafts. No, we have to overcome silos and we have to make good offers to the customers. It's easy, of course, if I have a company that covers all the crafts, but there is a basic need for reforms in the medium and long run, but in the short run, we have to do things and act fast, and we have to communicate about it. So the one project in Bavaria that was just mentioned is one example, but you can also use examples from abroad. Don't look to Denmark only, but also to Switzerland, for example. There are also neighborhood solutions, which in the past only had solar energy and a little bit distribution, but now they add heat pumps. And it's really very interesting. I just took a look at this. And you can use the building as a heat storage and provide flexibilities for the electricity field. And we need this, of course, when we see the fluctuation of generation more and more. So there are interesting models. And in the solar package one, the energy communities, they are already going in this direction. So we do have room for maneuver, but we need to motivate people to do this. And I always say, tell the good stories, because if you tell a good story, well, then this is very successful. Okay, let me add one more point. When I remember the beginnings of the digital model, when we wanted to implement it, we got a lot of questions, but relatively quickly we managed to involve the business partners and the individual departments to supply the data, and suddenly things accelerated. We needed the year 2022 to get prepared, to position ourselves, but now we are in the follow-up phases where we can do detailed profitability calculations, we can use the digital solutions, and we can then also compare district heating, compare to heat pump, what is best where. And we are now in a position to also offer this within 14 weeks. We can implement it for other public utilities as well. And we got a lot of inquiries. And with this, we can link the electricity suppliers view and the public utilities and the municipal view. And this means that we've got a huge acceleration in the bureaucracy processes, in the approval processes. So the question, how long do we need in order to get an approval? It's not possible to wait for months for just a simple approval. An approval should be there within 2 weeks. For distribution system within a month, because people want a solution. Let's imagine your heating fails in your home. Do you have to wait for 3 months before you get a solution, or will you just go for the short solution and get a gas boiler again, because the craftsmen still have gas boilers and can install them very quickly. So this is very often neglected, and this needs to be changed. And we can do this in cooperation with the different stakeholders. We have to implement things together. This is very important, implementation and execution.
What you've just described, the visualization of what we've discussed, this complexity, this is far more powerful when you see something, when you can look at how a city is slowly electrified. You can see, for instance, how the grid is growing street by street. And as you rightly said, the decisive thing is that it also actually thrills the parties affected, because the citizens, we owe them an answer. The moment I published such a planning and I visualize it, it produces an immediate effect. When the citizens of a neighborhood can see that electrification is planned from 2030, they would actually panic otherwise. And this is why the involvement of actors or stakeholders is part and parcel of heat planning. Nevertheless, it is an extremely powerful tool, visualization, to actually get the imagination going with the actors, so that they're all on the same page visually and everybody knows what's meant and what's happening where, what. I think this is a crucial success factor. Yeah, I wanted to add this. I would like to cover one more question, and that is the question of data, because we have 2 questions in the chat dealing with this. Where do the data come from? Or the question, is this in compliance with the General Data Protection Ordinance? As a municipality, I don't have the relevant data. I have my views on this, but I would like to ask you first. Who would like to come in on this one? Well, I can get started if you like. This should be enriched from the practical view. From the top view, from the bird's eye view, I think that we have not paid enough attention to data protection, to privacy. In the area of buildings, traditionally, this data has been or have been considered as a valuable asset to be protected. But we will not be able to put the heat transition into practice without using this data. As Holger Krawinkel put it, we need a monitoring. At present, it is very difficult to measure progress in the heat transition because the database is so poor and people have little access to this data. Things are improving because we get more snapshots. But what about the speed? We have to see how fast we're making progress. We need timelines that allow us to explain why some political tools have worked and others haven't, or we probably need more tools. This is lacking everywhere. It's lacking locally, but also across the board. The proposal for the Heat Transition Act also contains ordinances for this, for data protection. I know from Baden-Württemberg, for instance, some of these things have already been put into practice. It is difficult, and it entails a lot of work for municipalities. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, we need this legal framework allowing municipalities to obtain access to this data, but we also need communication to change the mindset to enable all of this. And we need this accumulation of data so that one municipality can learn from the other, because this also accelerates matters and it serves as a benchmark. Yes, feel free. Maybe from the practical viewpoint, Baden-Württemberg, I briefly mentioned it, Mrs. Weiss already covered it. Baden-Württemberg is one step further. Historically speaking, not everybody was happy in the past with this move. Now we realize that it was a good step. We were able to prepare for this. Well, what do we do in Mannheim in concrete terms? Well, we had a planning agency, and that compiled the data from the public utilities side, from the Baden-Württemberg authorities, from environmental boards, but also data from the chimney sweepers, because this was also part of the question in the chat. They have electronic registers, and every heating is included in an iPad, and there's the manufacturer mentioned, the type and model is mentioned, and all of this data has been aggregated, and then they looked what was available. Then they looked at the potential available, and on this basis, they created a map. What's so interesting about this map now? And what's the big opportunity of this map? For the first time, we've created transparency about where cities still face major challenges. We found, for instance, that in Mannheim, many people still use coal to heat their dwellings. In 2023, people still consistently use coal-fired ovens. So there are things that need to be tackled in this land. This is so obsolete, this type of heating. Mr. Schlosser mentioned it at the beginning that he loves to sit in front of his log fire. The chimney sweeper controls this very well. Everything's properly adjusted, but not that I actually produce such emissions for 6 months a year. This needs to be tackled. And when talking to city councillors and discussing with them, we actually found that thanks to these compiled maps for the neighborhoods, we can now also act in a targeted matter. We can take a clearer look at where we see demands, what needs to be done for citizens, encouraging them to refurbish their buildings and takes the next steps there to encourage them to invest, regardless of this flat rate sponsoring. And this, I think, is a very, very big progress compared to the intransparency that actually governed the past in this area. Maybe briefly on this one again. The point is, of course, to make this generally available. I think it was 2 years ago when I received a memorandum from the building ministry, And like in Denmark, it was planned to draw up a central building register that contains all of the essential data. I have not followed up whether this has really been put into practice, but at least the government had planned it one time. Another example, I talked to the colleague from the Baden-Württemberg Energy Agency, and it was about obtaining data more easily from the statistical authority to really compile the data in such a manner that municipalities just receive one file that helps them to plan their heating plan. But they didn't want to have this because this actually interferes with municipality rights. So this goes to show that many things will have to happen until we will see this change of mindset with a real focus on feasibility. The heating planning or the heat planning itself will actually flag up all of these problems, all of these issues. And as Mr. Gabriel just said, we will all of a sudden realize cases that are unheard of. These two processes will actually generate acceleration, and I'm very optimistic about that. Yes, let me also briefly talk about data sourcing or mining. We have several customers, both from the municipality area, and they need this data, and they need different data. But when I focus on the municipal data planning, yes, this is not very transparent, and there's no German rule where you press a button and then you get the right set of data that you need. Although this is not quite true, we also have some service providers on the market. It's not the energy agencies or the state boards for surveying. It is private providers who have anticipated this development and therefore prepared aggregated data sets for heat planning, high resolution ones, and you can buy them at high prices, of course. And this helps to accelerate the process, which is written down in the law. And I'm always shocked as a practitioner when I see that some have to make their data available from the 1st of January. But first of all, the good news is that the duty to cooperate is a given for those who have the data. So this will be a given. It has not been pushed ahead with, but it will happen. The chimney sweepers are really instrumental because they still have meters of paper in their cabinets. This needs to be digitalized. This is practical problems, but this is not a reason to say, well, this is all nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It is possible at the end of the day. With the data you can get, and this is the building data that all of these state authorities for surveying can provide, they form the basis for this view. And based on this data, the heat demands are calculated. The LOD, data level of detail, is the abbreviation. And the second version, the second LOD level, in addition to the height and the floor, the ground floor of the building, contain further data required to calculate the heat demand. This does not actually allow you to take any conclusions regarding the refurbishment state of a building, but even this can be had at a low price. The message is very simple. Each municipality can actually do a demand analysis on this basis without having to compile or have compiled any data, or without having to force owners to deliver this data. So with a little effort, we can already obtain the data without the direct cooperation of the stakeholders to do a pretty precise demand analysis, and legally so. We've done this in other development areas as well. When I think of the potential analysis done for district heating, we did it exactly the same way. We can do a feasibility study and decide whether it pays off or not. And what we and others do at this point goes even beyond this. What am I trying to say? The minute you have taken stock, and it is a strategic thing, you do not actually have to know it for each individual home to the precision of the kilowatt hours. No, I simply need to be able to take stock and to calculate the heating needs. And you either know that these homes are connected to the gas grid, or you know that they have oil heating, and this knowledge is legal. And this is the way how to go about it. At the end of the day, this allows you to discuss this topic, because this is the political idea underlying this heat planning, that you actually bring all of the stakeholders together around the table on the same databases, using visualization to be on the same page, to really make progress, and to draw conclusions for the stakeholders, telling them who has to do what when, and to invest how much, with the consequences for the citizens. This is what we found several times. Despite all of the obstacles we're facing, this is the objective we need to aim for, and there are many actors on the market doing this right now, and come up with fantastic insights. And this is why I would like to talk about the good examples again and ask you, Mrs. Weiss, you've observed this as well. Do you also have such a good practice example regarding insights, or allowing you to say, well, this needs to be mentioned?
Ähm, ich bin gerade so über Ihren Begriff.
Still thinking about what you said about making things clearer. Well, this is an excellent example. This cannot be overestimated. It's really so important to make things clear, to provide clarity. And this also was shown in the heating debate we had last year. The uncertainty really created problems. People couldn't sell the heat pumps because people did not really know what to do. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and we have to make things clear again by talking to each other, by visualization what is happening. And now I can think of an example for something that can create clarity, and this is the refurbishment sprint. And the one example here is absolutely low tech. It's just the joint lunch of all the craftsmen, where people can talk to each other, clarify problems, and then continue the work in the afternoon. And this is so nice. This is so human that you can really also use it as an example for other areas as well. Yes. Yes, there the energy transition or the heat transition starts on a very low basis. Great, thank you. Now I just looked at the clock. We have another 10 minutes. And we said that at the end of our discussion, we would like to develop a perspective for the future. And if we now take a look back to the past 2 hours, well, we try to talk about the the task at hand and what it's to be used for. And we also said that this is something that will accompany us for the next 20 years at least. We talked about very concrete challenges which are there abundantly. We talked about complexity, we talked about dynamic developments, we talked about the need of proper digital tools that help us capture data and simulate the future and anticipate the consequences of different actions. And I think it became clear that it is necessary to talk to each other, that it is necessary to approach one another, even if you know that the target is perhaps not absolutely clear-cut yet. But I think here we really have to say we have to take the first step on a way. And I think I can say that many people already took the first step, are now in the process of taking the second or third step. Now, what would you say, Mr. Krawinkel? Let's now say we are in the year 2045. What do you think? What will Germany look like in the year 2045 regarding the heat transition? I'm quite confident. I do not want to repeat what Mrs. Merkel once said, but it is feasible. We can do this. And now heat planning is the second step. We already had voluntary energy concepts, heat concepts. So it's not something that is completely starting from scratch. We do have some experience. There will also be pioneers. This is very important, as I already mentioned, but we will have to expand this system. We are only at the beginning. I am a spatial and urban planner by profession, and in the 1960s, we started regional planning, urban planning, and this never existed before. And now passive climate protection, use of space, and so on. We do need a comprehensive planning system in order to meet our responsibilities. And we are only in the beginning. Things will get clearer and more detailed, but we do need pioneers now. We need people who show how it can be done, positive examples, and this needs to be communicated. We need short-term changes based on monitoring. So what can be changed very quickly? Data protection. And we also need preparation for long-term changes, municipal reforms, and so on and so forth. And if we cover all these areas, then I'm pretty sure that in the year 2045, the heat transition will be complete. The Danes want to complete this by 2028. We will be lagging 15 years behind, but I'm confident that we can do this. Okay, now an example crossed my mind. We just had a trade fair, a convention in Berlin. And on Tuesday, I was at this convention and I saw some developments regarding the complexity of the issuing of an identity card. Normally, it takes 8 to 10 weeks. You have to apply for it. It takes a long time. But then during this show, there was the federal printing shop with a digital printer, and you could get your identity card. You couldn't just enter some money and get it, but it is possible to get it more quickly than ever before, a valid identity card. And this is a pilot project which will then be rolled out to all the local authorities, and this really gives us courage. So it is possible to take these steps. I thought that this was an excellent example. Mr. Gabriel, what about the situation in Mannheim in 2045? 2045 in Mannheim, well, if I remember well what we said as MVV, we will be climate positive. So we will use CO2, we will take CO2 from the environment, use CCS, for example, and we will also have seen major changes in the heat market, but positive change. And I assume that for 5 years, we have been discussing the next steps in the heat market, planning the next solutions for the time ahead, because you can assume that every 20 years there is a technological leap. And I hope, and this is also a personal wish of mine, that we can then really benefit from our innovation power in Germany and in Europe. And we then have done everything that we can play at the highest level at an international scene. Oh, thank you. Mrs. Weiss, what does the conscience say? The conscience? Well, the conscience, of course, also says we will have done it by 2045. We just managed to do this. We have a climate neutral heat supply, and that in a very digital way. We saw that it's also fostered transformations in the industry, and we saw this as a positive way, also taking into account social factors. So we solved the housing problem. We no longer have an increase of smaller houses, but we have a modular approach to housing, and we really did it together. I didn't expect anything else from our good conscience, but let me also add one more point. I've been doing this for around about 15 years now, and I've been in the digital area, started with smart metering, and now I'm in the digital heat planning. And if I look back to the speed with which this heat plan topic came from 0 to 100 kph, including the complex systems, and also bearing in mind that we have some municipalities that are not the largest one, but that were the first ones to do this. Lörrach was one of the first ones to do this. 18 months ago, no community ever thought about this. It was not a very important topic in the council decisions to do heat planning. And now, well, it's on the agenda of all the municipalities. People are thinking about it. They are doing this. And if I extrapolate this speed, then I would reach the same figures than for the increase in renewable energies right now. And this will bring us in a good position in 2045. Then we will have proven that it's possible that an industrial country such as Germany is able to be independent from fossil energy supply, and this means that we will definitely also export this to other countries. We are seeing what is currently happening, and I think this is a much more attractive model once we have done this, and we can export this into other countries as well. So we will be back in the driver's seat, in the pole position, when it's about delivering the processes and the framework conditions, so that we will not be alone in the world, but that we can export climate neutrality. So let me close the discussion now, right on time. I would like to thank you very much for your participation. I would like to thank the audience for listening and for asking questions. Of course, I hope that you also learned something, that you can take back some information. You will also be able to receive the charts I showed you, and you can always contact me. So let me say thank you to Mrs. Weiss for sharing your views and for the confidence. Mr. Gabriel, thank you very much for the really very detailed insights and also for the open words, and also for sharing the challenges and problems that you had in Mannheim, and you still do this, and you made a lot of progress. Thank you very much for your experience, and also for the lobby work that you are doing. You already mentioned this, and together with you, well, Mr. Krawinkel, we will be the drivers. We are important, and I hope that it was now also spreading to you, and I wish you a nice day, rest of the day. Thank you for being here. Mrs. Bors. Well, thank you very much. Well, I was definitely infected by your great actions, and I thought it was really fun listening to you and your guests. It was really a pleasure to see the potential, the motivation, and this makes me very confident for the future that heat planning is a good instrument and will lead us to heat transition. And this would have been my last question, but you took it away from me. Thank you very much, Mr. Schlösser. Thank you for the very entertaining and vivid moderation. Thank you for your preparation. Thank you to the panelists for making this possible, for being available, and for having such a lively exchange. Should there be any further questions? You already said this. Yes, at any point in time, you can contact us. My team and myself will also be happy about criticism, feedback, praise, comments. Use the chat, write to us using the social networks, or communicate via email. We are always grateful for feedback, and we look forward to seeing you during the eWorld Live. Some of the people here will definitely be there. Mr. Schlosser said that he will be on the show, and perhaps also the other panelists. I also would like to thank the people working behind the scenes. First of all, my team, the entire event and marketing team, making it possible to have this event today, who informed everybody about this event. And I would like to thank our design team, who were responsible for the videography, and we also would like to thank our two technicians who then provided the two separate streams, and a big thank you to our two interpreters who made it possible to also have English listeners. So that was the eWorld kickoff this year, and I really look forward to February when we meet each other again, when we can meet face to face, and I really look forward to this special trade show atmosphere. And we'll then also see what we can do. Already get your ticket for the show, and I now would like to invite you to something that Mrs. Weiss already mentioned. Let's get together with many people for lunch. This helps, and you can have a wonderful exchange. So it's 12:05. Let's start our lunch break and see you soon. Thank you.